doing a general, introduction with my guests, what I like to do is ask them to bring an item of significance, and that item connects them with their community, but it also holds a value to them as a person. So Nigel, Steve, who wants to go first? Steve.
Oh, okay. Well, look, I brought a photograph in because I've been thinking about the podcast and the community that's gathered around it, and I think the person that I'm seeing within myself as I do this is my maternal grandfather, John Field, who was a builder for his life, but then when he retired early because he did relatively well for himself. He would go down into his little shed, and his great passion was to work with all the various bits of timber that he had. He made hundreds, if not thousands, of little wooden trinkets, and he would lose himself in that shed for hours every single day. And the back of my mind, I remember thinking as a young adult, why is he doing this? He had the joy in making it, and if people got joy from it, you could see that he loved it. But if they didn't, it wouldn't stop him from doing it. And in some ways, or actually in every single way, that's happening in me. I've got his DNA strongly. The rush of endorphins that I get, which is probably certifiable, is superb for me. It's sublime. I love, because I get to really listen to our guests properly once all the pressure's off, and I get to enjoy them.
I think that's fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your item of significance.
Thank you for asking. It's actually a joy to be able to connect the dots.
So now, as I mentioned...
You brought a significant item too.
I did. So what I brought is a story. Because for me, what connects me with my community or various communities throughout my life is storytelling. I'm a passionate storyteller, and Enid Blyton was an author through my childhood, that I read a lot of, and also not only my childhood, but my mother's childhood, because this book says, "Happy birthday, Veronica," that's my mum, "Love, Dad, August 59. So this book was given to my mother in 1959 from her dad, and then I read it as a child, and now I read it to my son. So for me, the legacy of story is that you pass them down. The next question I normally ask is around duration, like length to build community. Now that we've got digital access to information that's really quick, we're almost expecting speed dating to happen with our content, digestion, and for people to go, but that's just not how it works, in my opinion. So Steve is shaking his head.
Look, it's just that now that I'm doing the 100 Weeks Ago episode, go back into our annals and get little bits and pieces from the past, and I'm shocked at every single time I've dived back. It shows you the history of listens, of downloads of that episode over time. There's always listens happening in that week. Like, it's bizarre, this long tail, we call it, of consumption.
So then it needs to come out to community. So what is that value, and where is that value added from community? I'm really interested in uncovering that.
Developing a separate sort of community of people who listen to the podcast for sort of the, intellectual reward of listening to it, of hearing interesting people. We interview them, but also I think they actually appreciate that there's ourselves and our listeners are actually interested in their story as well. And whereas a lot of the small businesses and small little communities, most people would view it as, oh yeah, that's just, Fred, he's doing his job. And they wouldn't necessarily see Fred as part of the community.
Here's the dilemma I think we face. The people in the boardrooms of the big media organisations don't believe us when we say they have interesting stories. And they don't believe us because there is a lot of research that says consumers are fickle. We say we want to buy local. We say we care about stuff. But when we actually analyse what's in our shopping basket at the shop, it's the cheapest stuff. They're torn at a business accounting level to go where it's basic. And you know what? I don't care. That's why I love that I'm alive and able to do this in 2017, because We don't need them. We can have as many different flavors of podcast as people are willing to make, and we can pick and choose, and we can curate our own listening environment, and we can get to hear those stories without that condescending approach that media take when they're doing the human interest story, and they have a certain sing-songiness in their voice, and isn't that lovely? The sort of story that gets shoved after the weather on TV news. If we didn't do what we did, the world would still go on very happily, but there are people who gather around it. Like when you throw a big boulder into a stream, it gathers moss and it gathers other things from the cut and thrust of life. And our job is to try and put ourselves in the way of the people who we think might care the most. And we ask our guests to help on that, to let their networks know they've been on it. And it's grassroots. It's slowly built. I don't even know what the question is I'm answering.
No, it's great. Good. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next question because we've got so passionate here
Yes.
that
We'll give it some focus after this.
So we're going to wrap it up though, and we'll be doing that because we conclude with each guest to share your Be the Drop tip. So that's how we'll conclude. And your Be the Drop tip is your top communications tip. So we'll throw to Steve because Nigel's got the camera there. What is Steve's Be the Drop tip?
So for me, my tip is to not just go for the sake of it, but wait until you've got something you go, you know what? Yes, I can do that over and over and over again. There's a bottomless pit of energy, of source that I can draw from that will fire me up week in, week out. When I'm bleary-eyed and it's late hours, I will still do it. I will still edit this. I will still push it. That's the thing that's worth your ongoing engagement with.
I think the main thing is just, as was mentioned there, actually being authentic. There's plenty of styles that people try to emulate. There's certain methods that people try to be. But I think actually people actually are looking for the genuine and authentic these days. It's very easy to construct anything. You can make fake videos. You can make your voice sound like whatever you want. But actually just being genuine and actually being honest with the listeners, that the people you're interviewing aren't putting on a performance for you. It's actually just a straight to the heart, who these people actually are, what motivates them. I think they're the stories that I actually like and motivates me for sort of wanting to keep on doing the podcast.
Thank you for doing your show in front of us, but including us.
It was my pleasure.